So here in the rather beautiful Dunkeld Cathedral, very peaceful spots on the banks of the River Tay, just flowing down from the wonderful Loch Tay and out towards Dundee. It was here in 1689 that a British Army regiment, newly formed as the Earl of Angus's, later the Cameronians, defended the town from Highlanders, leading to the death of the commanders involved on the British government side, but ultimately their victory. And that was pretty much the end of the first Jacobite Rising. It's much overshadowed by the 1745, which culminated at Culloden and then the West Coast actions. However, to get from Culloden back from Charles II, who was the restored monarch, the King of Bling, the People's Party, and then bringing us to the Highlands, where we have Scots on Scots fighting for the control of not just the Scottish crown, but all of the British throne, is a rather strange turn of events. So why was James II popular and unpopular?
So James II was, I think, popular in some circles for genuinely ahead of his time religious toleration. And you can read that one of two ways. He either wanted to make Britain religiously tolerant and therefore bring back his own personal Catholic faith, or he was genuinely a man slightly ahead of his time. Either way, he was unpopular because he decided to circumvent Parliament in order to force these measures through. He'd also previously been the Lord High Admiral and had done a not terrible job in bringing the Royal Navy up to snuff after the restoration of his brother, Charles II.
Because Charles II was a Protestant until his deathbed.
Yes, Charles II converted to Catholicism on his deathbed, and there was always a long-running suggestion that he had harboured very deep Catholic sympathies in the past. Very possible.
Very possible, and certainly converted on his deathbed, which then gave us a Catholic monarch in Britain, which there's been suspicions about, possibly because of the gunpowder plot, but at least since the Reformation. And a lot of bloodshed had been shed around the Reformation for and against, not just in England and Scotland, but actually in Europe. The wars were actually far worse. And I think there was probably this fear of a religious war leading up.
I think there was more than that as well. I think in the minds of English and Scottish Protestants, Catholicism was a religion of tyranny and oppression and absolutism. And I think people who had come to really value what they saw as their personal liberty and their parliamentary rights. Now, Charles II obviously suspended some of those, but Catholicism was inherently seen as linked to absolutism and universal monarchy that was embodied by Louis XIV and the Habsburgs as well.
Right, so James II's on the throne. He's trying to do some religious reforms. He's very sadly not had many children make it past infancy, very young deaths, and then has another son.
Yes.
And I hate the term fake news, so I would say there's a lot of propaganda about this son. The baby being snuck in the warming pan was one.
So there's an idea that it wasn't actually his child, that it was a child of a maidservant or someone else that was smuggled into the bedchamber in a warming pan to, the Queen's had a boy and he's going to live.
And this is the era of official witnesses to a royal birth. A lot of old men sitting there at the end of a bed watching the Queen give birth.
Yeah, I don't have much faith in it myself,
No.
but what it did was galvanise a response from the kind of anti-James faction in Parliament, because they weren't too worried. If James didn't have any children, the crown would devolve on Mary, who was a devout Protestant. Two daughters, Mary and Anne, both of whom were very staunch Protestants in very different ways.
And people probably know from The Favourites, the Oliver Coleman film.
Yes, and Queen Anne's Revenge,
Queen Anne's Revenge was Blackbeard's ship. But we don't actually see that much about them in pop culture and British films these days. But his eldest daughter was married to a Dutchman.
Yes, William of Orange, the Stadtholder, the kind of the president or the kind of the prince-elect of the United Provinces, so the Netherlands.
On giving a battlefield tour here, I asked the Dutch officer cadets to summarise what a stadtholder was to me, and even they struggled with between prince, president, noble,
king,
and under king, but more than a mayor.
Yeah,
but certainly a very Dutch title.
Yeah, and he was a very ruthless and experienced, still quite young politician, a very, very committed Protestant, an inveterate enemy of Louis XIV of France, who was James II's ally-ish. And 7 lords, who were called the Immortal Seven, in the summer of 1688, send a petition to William to come and free them from their looming fate of Catholic-imposed tyranny.
Yes, strong words. And so he does, he sets sail.
He sets sail, lands at Torbay. Initially, James is thinking maybe he'll try and stick it out. Interestingly, the Royal Navy plays a part. Admiral Torrington, I believe his name was ordered to sail to intercept, and did so. But in a sort of slightly slovenly manner, you might say, so that he could neither be accused of not following his orders, nor could he, if William won, could he be accused of trying to prevent him from winning. And very interestingly, I think there was some genuine concern on the Dutch side that they might be beaten in a battle and William killed or captured.
And there was a lot of people who hedged their bets. Marlborough, he became a great general, one of Britain's great. Even he was hedging his bets quite early on.
Yeah, so most sort of establishment figures, you could say, Marlborough being a senior military officer, establishment figure, didn't want to come down too hard on one side or the other. And interestingly, James, I think, thought he was going to try and stick it out initially, and there were some skirmishes around Reading in Berkshire. But ultimately, towards the end of 1688, I think it's November, he gives up and he flees to France. He flees to France.
And in the fleeing so on the Thames, he either drops or he throws one of the great seals of state
into the river. Yeah.
Which is interpreted by some, maybe as wishful thinking, that he's abdicated.
I don't think James saw it that way.
I don't think James probably did. But it's certainly that between the propaganda that his son is illegitimate and the propaganda that he's either dropped or thrown his great seal of office, which, you know, is used as stamp to make laws into effect with royal assent, into the Thames, he might have abdicated. And therefore people can give legitimacy to the newly invited prince.
So it's interesting. A lot of them were very keen on only crowning Mary Queen. The problem was William had a big army. He was an ambitious young man and decided that actually he'd quite like to be co-monarch. So they were crowned. It's why if you ever get one of those classic wooden rulers of kings and queens of England, it's William and Mary.
William and Mary, yeah.
Obviously, James still had quite a lot of supporters across England and certainly in Scotland and in Ireland. And that cause would not necessarily go gently into the good night, as it were.
No. And whilst Ireland's going to be the hotbed and the focus of most of actually James's campaigns, of him fighting there in person, along the River Tay from here, in the town of Dundee, there was James Claverhouse, who'd been an experienced general fighting often against the Covenanters, who in what was known as the killing times. And this is lots of, well, they were quite a religious extremist group in one sense and religious freedom in another sense, off around in Scotland, trying to have outdoor ministries, and they're being hunted by the government. And James Claverhouse, as a cavalry commander for most of this, did a lot of the hunting. And there were actually some pitched battles. Covenanters won one and lost a few. And he was then known as Bloody Clavers because of some of his actions. And he went outside of what was then Dundee city walls, what's now Dundee law, very much within the modern city, raised a standard for James.
This was early 1689.
Very early 1689, and ironically, as he did so, the city actually barred him from re-entering. So it shows that split loyalties very early on, because he was a big principal figure within the city, leaves for a couple of hours and they lock him out.
There's a great line in the song about him, Bonnie Dundee, where they go, the town is well rid of that devil Dundee.
By made famous by the Corries, I believe.
Yeah.
Dundee is mounted and he rides up the street, the bells steering backward and drums their beat. But the Provost man says, let it all be, for the tenors were rid of the devil Dundee. Come fill up my call, come fill up my can. Come sad of my earsies and call it my men. Unhook the west port and let us get free. But it's up way the bonnet, so bonnet indeed.
And so he starts the rebellion, uprising, loyalist movements, as depending on your tract, up here in just under what's the Highland fault line. So we're about as close to the Highlands as you can be without being geographically in the Highlands, which is a source of a whole different debate. And he's moving around, and he goes up towards Blair Athol Castle.
The sort of traditional Jacobite staging point it becomes, doesn't it?
It's used time and time again in history. It's a beautiful castle, not very far from Dunkeld, and on the main route, if people are doing the classic tourist route of 3 days in Scotland, where they do Edinburgh, Inverness, Loch Ness, Skye and back down, which is quite a few miles, but Blair Athol is worth a stop, and it's just off the main A road, and it does see a couple of sieges later on as well. And he's moving back down whilst the Scottish army, as was, because we're pre-Union.
Yeah, so this is really important to note. This is not the British army, this is not the English army. This is the Earl of Angus's regiment, as in the county of Angus, later becoming the Cameronians. So this is very much a Scottish battle.
It's a Scottish battle. They were, ironically, Covenanters that had been commissioned, and their commander, William Cleland, had actually been with William of Orange over in the mainland and had helped form part of the vanguard when he forms a beachhead in case they were going to come under fire. So he's very loyal to the cause, and also has real religious fervour, and also a poet. He's remembered on his plaque.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
He's a poet. No, so the title of his biography is Not Much of a Soldier, which just seems a bit harsh, but certainly known for his poetry and his religious fervour at the time. And Bonnie Dundee's killed at Killiecrankie, and so then for the grounds behind us, after a bit of marching through the Highlands, becomes the final staging post of the later stages of the battle.
Bearing in mind that after Killiecrankie, the Highland army had actually grown, because Dundee had won this famous victory at Killiecrankie and completely smashed, I believe it's...
That cost him his life.
Yeah. Smashed the mixed Anglo-Scottish force there, but it had cost him his life. But his armies swelled after his defeat, his death, under the command of an Irishman, Colonel Cannon, as in spelt like the artillery piece.
It's the most apt name.
Yeah.
And so you have a lieutenant colonel, battalion commander, holding this area, and it's a small town, Dunkeld, about as pretty as they get though. And we end up with this final devastating street action, house by house, burning houses. They actually lock the Jacobites into some of the houses as they attack it and burn the roofs. Certainly, no mercy really asked or given on either side. But it does lead us to the last action of the Jacobite first war.
First war in certainly in the mainland of Britain.
In the mainland, whilst Ireland's ongoing. So it's really devastating, and both sides have relatively large casualties for quite small armies. And it doesn't feel like it today.
No, you can barely get the sense of it, and because most of the town was destroyed in the fighting, there's only one of the original streets is still here. So the main
whole
house,
street and the manse house of it is destroyed.
Yeah, so the Cameronians end up sort of bolted up in the manor house. That's gone now.
They're pulling lead off the roof to make more musket
making
balls.
musket balls as they go. There's a hill just behind the cathedral, which is sort of a 45-degree slope that some of the Highlanders launch a charge up and manage to chase a redcoat company off of the top of the mound. And you think, God, going up there on the fire, it's a very quite steep rise. It's not particularly short either.
No, and if you come here, the east-facing side of the cathedral actually has musket ball holes on it as well, showing how close they were with the fighting. But ultimately, the Highlanders gave up. I think, reading quite a few different sources, it was probably due to the high casualties within individual clans that had been leading the street fighting, which meant that the family system was breaking down. And if you lose your uncle and your cousin and your brother, you then turn around to your clan chief and go, I've got to go back and do all the work for the whole farm.
Yeah. And I think as well, what you see in sort of risings like the 45 or even in 1715, that you have a charismatic leader who can kind of, after the army's taken a bit of a bloody nose, can kind of pick them back up and get them moving again. But with Dundee dead,
don't have that
Viscount Dundee dead, you don't have that. And Colonel Cannon, you know, as much as he is a well-trained professional soldier, seems to do relatively well, he is an Irishman, doesn't have that kind of repartee with the clan chiefs, and they feel they can probably overrule him.
And there's some deep irony as well within the fighting, that William Cleland, the commander of the Cameronians, is killed quite early on. While mortally wounded, he takes a musket ball to the abdomen and crawls off so that his men don't see him die, which is damn brave stuff. His second in command, Henderson, a major, is shot and killed.
He gets killed as well, doesn't he?
So yeah, we're left to company commanders, some of whom have next to no experience. They've only actually been fully armed for a matter of weeks, and there's different accounts. There's a beautiful painting of them all in red coats and wigs and wide-brimmed hats, but there's a reenactment group locally, and I've been speaking to them, and they think they've got a source where they were classed as being naked, which means that they were either unissued in uniform, so they're wearing their own clothes, or they were issued in grey coats that had not been dyed in the famous red. So this is a regiment that has very little experience, and they're digging their heels in against Highlanders that are coming in.
And they're not a full battalion either. There's only about half strength, maybe just over half strength, 600 men.
600 to 700 is like the sources. So they're certainly outnumbered. And actually the Highlanders have captured some leather guns, some very light cannon from Killiecrankie, from their own side. So,
and those are what they sound like, folks. They are cannons made out of lots of rolls of leather wrapped around a small copper tube.
That's in. So yes, it becomes quite an interesting fight, swinging both ways. But I particularly like Dunkeld because
it's a very, very beautiful town.
It's a beautiful town. It's also got some good pubs. There's hotels. It's in a good point in Scotland to strike off north, south, east and west, because we're not far from the central point of the mainland of Scotland. But you end up with this really good battle tactically to study, and we're not far from Killiecrankie, so you can kind of combine the visit. But I think kind of because of the bloody elements here and the house-to-house fighting, Dunkeld is actually a really good visit.
I think it's an interesting tactical action as well. It proves that warfare in this period is not all lines of people blazing away at each other in a field. Some actually very interesting tactical problems commanders had to solve, and went about them in interesting and quite violent ways.
I was going to say the pure violence, the house-to-house fighting with some of the Highlanders have Loch Arbor axes, these two-handed axes with a hook on the end. You've got pikes being used and broadswords on both sides.
Or plug bayonet. So a plug bayonet is basically a dagger that you shove down the muzzle of your musket because you don't have one of the later ring bayonets. What it means is it's a great club with the end and a great spear because you've got the bayonet in it, but you can no longer really use it as a musket. You'd have to take a hammer and knock the bayonet out.
You lose your ability to fire.
Yeah.
And the good thing about the ring bayonet is, if you're wondering what that looks like, have a look at some of your light bulbs, because there's two types. There's screw and bayonet fitting, and that's where we get the name from. But that is actually quite a lot of the 1690, with actions up in the northeast of Scotland, Cromdale, Killiecrankie and Dunkeld, not taking account to Ireland, because that's worthy of its own large campaign, still famous today because of the Boyne, but there's actually bloodier battles than the Boyne. So what happens to James?
So James stays in France after this.
So he's in Ireland. He leaves.
He leaves Ireland. So I think there's a nickname he has in Ireland, which is Jimmy Caca, which I won't translate into English, but I'm sure people can work out what that means. He leaves and leaves his commands to some of his subordinate officers and goes to France, and always sort of tries to agitate for a return of his descendants to the throne of England and Scotland and Ireland, and it's what leads to the risings in 1715. It's what leads to the rising in 1745, and even subsequent attempts. So as late as the late 1750s, so we're looking at 1759, when the French and Spanish are looking to just the French at the time, actually, are looking to invade as part of the 7 Years' War.
So his son is proclaimed king in exile.
His son is proclaimed king in exile.
Becomes the Old Pretender?
The Old Pretender, who I believe is also called James, confusingly. And his son, so James II's grandson, is Bonnie Prince Charlie of Culloden fame, the Young Pretender.
Now, he doesn't have any legitimate children.
No, sadly not.
But he has an illegitimate daughter who is later legitimised.
Yes, so he has a mistress called Clementina Walkinshaw, who I think he meets it during his time in Scotland.
I think he meets her in Scotland.
And has a daughter, Charlotte, with her.
Out of wedlock.
Well, he claims he married
in secret
Clementina, which, okay.
There's no evidence.
There's no evidence one way or the other.
We might take his word for it.
Yeah.
And if that was the case, then they had a legitimate child, if not another illegitimate child, who is buried in the nave.
In the nave there. Whose name was Charles Edward Stewart, imaginative, Count of Rohenstadt,
which is a combination of two names.
Yeah, Rohan, who were one of the most famous aristocratic families in France, who was allegedly his father. So Bonnie Prince Charlie's daughter had an affair with a cardinal, I believe, or he was certainly a senior cleric in the Roman Catholic Church. They had a child. He fled France during the Revolutionary period. And became a lieutenant colonel, although he later claimed to be a general.
Claimed to be a general
in the Imperial Russian Army, as a lot of French aristocrats did, and he died here in the 1850s.
He was visiting the next Duke of Athol up the road at Blair Castle.
He maintained his grandfather's claim.
Yeah.
So he maintained that he was the rightful king of Great Britain and Ireland, as it was then. And yeah, is buried just behind us. So the very
an accident in Dunkeld, and
the very beginning of the Jacobite cause, really, in many ways, we're around it, we're in it, and really, while yes, there are people like the Bavarian royal family claim some sort of tangential lineage. Really, the very end of the cause is behind us as well.
Oh, that's fair enough. But there's some deep irony that he's sitting in the same burial ground as William Cleland.
Yeah. Probably not more than a few feet away from each other.
A few feet away to that battle in 1689 to see off the Jacobite claim. So history has nothing but a sense of irony.
Yes.
And that kind of brings us full circle.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcus.
Was clever as spoke, the kings come go down there, crowns to be broke. So each cavalier who loves honour in me, let him follow the bonnet so bonny Dundee. Come fill up my cock, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call it my men. Unhook the west pot and let us get free, but it's up with bonnet so bonny Dundee. Dundee is mounted and he rides up the street, the bells steering backward, the drums their beat. But the provost's man says let it all be, but the tenors were rid of the devil Dundee. Come fill up my cock, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call it my men. Unhook the west port and let us get free, but it's up way the bonnet so bonny Dundee. There are hills beyond Pentland and lands beyond Forth, but there are lads in the south there that choosing the north, that have braved any wassels 3,000 times 3. Cry hey for the bonnet so bonny Dundee. Come fill up my cup, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call it my men. Unhook the west port and let us get free, but it's up way the bonnet so bonny Dundee.